Morning, guys. Today is kind of a lighthearted episode. What we're going to discuss is lesser known guitar players, and we're not going to do deep dives on any of their careers or nothing, but we're just going to mention some names that people might pass over in a record store, and I'm going to tell you you should grab these guys if you see them. If you're at all a fan of jazz guitar, most people know the names Kenny Burrell, Grant Green, Wes Montgomery, and those three guys kind of stand over the fray. Barney Kessel's there, Johnny Smith on Roost, that stuff's outstanding. We're not going to really dig into any of that stuff. Jim Hall, Joe Pass, those guys all have fairly big recognized names. So what we're going to do is talk about more second and third tier guys that probably did a lot of work as sidemen. Some of these guys are only sidemen, sadly. But these guys all are great players, add great color, great finger, like shading and just little intricate things that I think is I just adore it. I love guitar for its ability to add just dimension, shape, and color to a piece. I dabble in guitar myself, and it's a really versatile instrument. And like the piano, there's a lot of things you can do because you can play chords. So unlike a horn where you're playing one note and you can't really make a chord, these guitars can add full minors, majors, shapes, shades, and colors that really can add dynamics to a song. I do want to mention three guys off the bat who we're not going to cover again today for various reasons. One, Eddie McFadden. He plays on a lot of Jimmy Smith live records. He's a great guitar player. He got no records as a leader. If you listen to some of those early 50s, mid-50s Jimmy Smith records live, Eddie McFadden's killing it in the background. Really enjoy it. And he gets some fills here and there. And he's just a really great player that probably deserves to be on people's tongues more. Barry Galbraith was a member of the great rhythm section with Milt Hinton, Ozzie Johnson, and Hank Jones. And those guys recorded infinitely. Galbraith doesn't have many records as a leader. There's one which I don't got with some bird on the cover. I tried to buy it a few times, but I was lost it at auction. But Galbraith's work as a sideman is unending. It's voluminous. And then Freddie Green, he's the great rhythm player in Count Basie's great groups. And that rhythm section with Basie, Joe Jones, and the bass player's name is going to skip my mind now. It's one of the greatest rhythm sections of all time. Me and Jean-Michel talk about it. And Basie really is a key architect, even linking to James Brown in terms of knowing how to play space, how to swell and leave negative room in there. Basie is a grand architect of this whole game and gets very little credit or recognition. So that being said, we're not going to talk about any of the great greats. And I just talked about Mundell Lowe a couple times, so I'm not going to dig him out either. Friend of Bill Evans, got him signed, has 4 great records at Riverside. Mundell Lowe's worth digging out. And if I hadn't just talked about him on a couple different episodes, like Riverside Deep Dive, I talked about him. I'd probably do him in this episode too. But none of these guys here I would probably get an episode of their own because their discographies are small, their career arc is small, and the more obscure the artists I cover, the few reviews it gets. I think there'd be more people going, oh, I've never heard of this guy, I mean, watch that. But even the great Oscar Pettiford and Bud Powell, guys that should have gotten, I thought, pretty good viewership, the views was minimal compared to when we talk about Miles Davis or Blue Note. So I try to balance that out. I try to do some content that's, I know it's probably not going to be as popular, but again, we're doing it to teach and to share my love. And I love some stuff that's obscure. That's just part of the nature of the beast of jazz. And so I love jazz guitar. I did an episode on jazz guitar probably 8-9 months ago. I think it's a 4, 5, 6 part thing. I wasn't needle dropping at that point, so a lot of stuff needs to be redone. And so this is a kind of introduction into some of the great jazz guitar players most people aren't going to know too much about. I'm not going to give you too much information about them. I'm just going to kind of show you some of their stuff and say if you see these guys, you should grab them. And I'm not even going to speak for their whole careers. For example, Al Caiola, who I refer to as a guitar playing Fiorello LaGuardia, has these two early records on the Savoye label, 12033, 12057. And this one's early enough to still be the black and white series. And this one's probably just late enough where they were doing the color stuff. There's a real transition in the look of Savoye albums in the 12050s. Everything's black and white initially up to about 1255 or so. And so when you're shopping Savoye Records and the number is 12,000 through 12,055, you'll know it's the first pressing that has that black and white cover. Because almost all those titles got second and third covers as color came in and as some technology came in to allow doing more colors more economically. Sadly, Savoye rarely did well in their art department. It wasn't like they upgraded the covers. Sometimes they're worse. The Marion McPartlin reissues, the Errol Garner reissues, those covers are campy and dated. I'd rather the black and white photograph of the original covers, to be honest. So just keep that in mind. If you see old black and white Savoye album covers with the red blood label on the logo on the record itself, that's almost always going to be a first pressing. Almost always. Maybe a second pressing. But they did away with the black and white covers for a lot of those titles fairly early on. And when they start adding color, that gives you a good indication. Again, this is when they start adding color. I don't think I've ever seen another cover for this one. This is Kaolo right here. It's actually piano playing right there. And who's it? John Mahegan on the piano. Hank Jones on the piano. Kenny Clark. I forgot that he had that kind of royalty on this session. Hank Jones and Kenny Clark. And Hank Jones is always. There's some great KL right there. He's really a fine player, you know? And I'll warn you, he goes to United Artists next, and he records 20 records for United Artists in the 60s, probably the late 50s, and they're a lot schlockier, more commercial, movie soundtrack reenactments on, little trios and it's a lot more show tune, jazz. The United Artists stuff is to be a little bit more cautious about, but you really can't go wrong with any of the Al Caiola stuff that I've heard on Savoye. It's pretty outstanding. Next guy I want to talk about also sadly doesn't get any albums as a leader, which I think is sad because he's truly a fine player. It's a guy by the name of Joe Cinderella. And you probably heard me discuss Joe Cinderella when I talked about Gil Mel. If you watched that episode from about 3 weeks ago, we talked about Gil Mel, who does some albums of Prestige and Blue Note before becoming a Hollywood fixture. And all those Gil Mel records have Joe Cinderella on them. So does this Vinnie Burke record. And this Vinnie Burke record is a Bethlehem 10-inch. It's East Coast Jazz number 2, 1010 in the 10-inch series. And I am a big fan of Joe Cinderella. And he's another one of those guys where I'm like, why didn't he get a record as a leader anywhere? And for the most part, you see, like I said, he's on these 4 Gil Mel albums. And you should watch the Gil Mel episode if you haven't. He's Star Trek jazz. Very soundtracky, spacey, a lot of weird dissonant melancholy, but it's never too far out, so the harbor stays safe. And obviously Cinderella is also doing some stuff here at Bethlehem with Chris Connor, and this is her first 2 10-inches at Bethlehem, 1001, 1002. So very, very early Bethlehem 10-inches, probably 52, 53 in that era. Gus Wilde and company are recording these great Chris Connor records. And she leaves for Atlantic shortly after this and leaves Bethlehem kind of scrambling to fill that void, which they do with Nina Simone, albeit very briefly, before she moves on as well. Bethlehem was a very chaotic place in the early 50s. They certainly hit their stride in 55, 56. And then Bethlehem kind of falls to the wolves in the late 50s for the King sale. But these are great records. I love Chris Connor. I love this fantastic Vinnie Burke record. Let's see if we can find a little Joe Cinderella here. Let me just make sure he's on both sides. I'm pretty sure he is. Yeah, it's just the four of them. Don Burns. Clarinet is Ronnie Aldrich. Ronnie Aldrich. Accordion, Don Burns. Joe Cinderella guitar, and the bass is Vinnie Burke. Vinnie Burke's a great bass player. He's done a lot of Bethlehem stuff. He has a couple great records on ABC as well. There we go. I dig Joe. And Cinderella is one of those guys that I truly wish would have gotten a few records. You know, Bethlehem, put out a Joe Cinderella record. Next guy I want to talk about, a guy I don't know too much about. It's interesting too how many of the guitar players in jazz seem to have a certain Mediterranean to their background. Whether it be Spanish or Italian, there seems to be a certain amount of Caola, Cinderella. Was it Eddie Duran? It continues too, you'll see as well. This is an interesting record. It's on Fantasy, number 247. And I think they start at 3,200, so it's fairly early in the Fantasy discography. Do they list the group here? But they're putting him in the company of Tal Farlow, Carlos Montoya, Barney Kessel, Vinnie Gomez, and Jimmy Rainey. It's a cool record. And for my friend Jean-Michel, Eddie Duran has a long history in jazz. He's still in the business in the 70s and 80s from what I understand. Nice stuff. So if you see Eddie Duran records, again, jazz guitar has a vibe and a feel to it that to me is very unique. Another guy I didn't really touch in on my last series on jazz guitar was Herb Ellis. And I don't have a lot of his records, but he's also one of those guys that is infinitely a sideman. He plays with Oscar Peterson, Ray Brown. He's a part of a lot of verve sessions, laying down those great rhythm sections in all that Norman Granz stuff recorded in the 50s. Herb Ellis is on so much of that stuff. And he plays, of course, with Ray Brown a lot. Him and Ray Brown had a trio, and it's fantastic stuff. This is him playing Charlie Christian, who, of course, Christian was one of the great innovative guitar players. I think he came from Texas or Oklahoma. Charlie Christian did. Benny Goodman heard him, of course, got him on the stage. And Charlie Christian changes the way guitar was played, much like Parker changed the saxophone or Armstrong changed the trumpet. He was a really innovative Christian. And so here is the great Herb Ellis paying tribute to that great Charlie Christian legacy. And it's a beautiful record. Great cover. It's on the Verve label, 8381. 8381 puts it probably 1962, 61. The cover looks older than that, actually. He has a few other records as a leader at Verve that when I start buying records again, I plan on picking some more of his stuff up. That hasn't been an option for me since I stopped DJing. Another guy who I probably need to have more by is Tal Farlow, another Verve guy. He's actually got a lot of records at Verve. He's another great player. He's got some blues in him, to be honest. And he plays a fairly similar style to Grant Green at times. This is The More I See You. That sounds like it could be Grant Green there, a little bit that single note kind of style there. But Tal's got a lot of great chording and a lot of great playing as well. And I can't break down guitar players like a lot of guitar players can. I just talk about tone, feel, atmosphere, vibe, and I always enjoy his records. And I need to grab more of them. Next guy on the list is Dick Garcia. And this record at Dawn, that mostly you've heard me speak about a few times, is fantastic stuff. And if I recall, this has Bill Evans on it, Gene Quill, Frank Azzola, Terry Pollard. There's some great musicians on this Dawn label. And Dawn, the whole Dawn label of jazz records, it's only about 23, 24 titles, but it's all really outstanding stuff. So if you're out shopping and you see an old Dawn jazz record, whether it's Zoot Sims, whether it's Paul Kinnichet, whether it's Lucky Thompson, whether it's somebody you never heard of, that Dawn stuff's great. Matt Matthews, you're gonna dig that Matt Matthews stuff. He's a Dutch accordion jazz player, and extra cream cheese on my baguette, please. You know what I mean? It just has a vibe and an atmosphere to it that I love. And to me, jazz made in Europe has a calmer sensibility to it. It just doesn't have that same chaos and intensity of jazz recorded in New York. And even jazz recorded in LA, for all its up-tempo and fire and ferocity that a lot of that West Coast stuff actually has, it still doesn't seem to have the intensity of records recorded in New York. And I'll stick to my guns on that. To me, I'd be curious to see what the greatest hard bop records recorded outside of New York are. I probably should have cleaned this one before I played it. I know it's not in the best of shape. This is by the great Hank Garland. It's on Columbia, and it's actually not that easy a record to find. And he's only got one record in the jazz idiom, and I think he kind of was a session guy who was at Nashville. I think he has kind of a country background, if I recall. But you could hear that he's equally comfortable playing with these blues brothers at a fast tempo, playing some real gutsy stuff. Great player. Here he's playing with Joe Morello, Gary Burton, and Joe Benjamin. So there's a Gary Burton sighting. I didn't know much about Gary Burton when I did my Vibes episode, and a few people admonished me saying, "Why no Gary Burton?" And when I looked up Gary Burton, I realized this stuff was all on RCA in the 60s. A lot of his album covers don't look very jazzy. Totally missed Gary Burton. But there's a Gary Burton sighting right there. That's him. Sounds like a great player. But great stuff, Hank Garland. Dig it. If you stumble on that at a record store, worth having. Now, one of my favorite records, I've talked about this numerous times, and I think Bill Evans was also on this, is this fantastic, he's on side 2 on this fantastic Joe Puma record. Another Latin, Mediterranean kind of name, Italian. This is not that hard a record to find for an old jazz jubilee record, that is. You know, that's a pretty relative statement saying a jazz record's not that hard to find. But a lot of these jazz guitar players, they're kind of obscure enough that even a lot of record store guys aren't going to be like, "Oh, Joe Puma, let me make this $40. They're going to be like, Joe Puma, let me make this $16. And if you see Joe Puma for $16, grab it. This, of course, has the old wax sleeve. It's Jubilee number 1070, so it probably puts it about 58. And Jubilee at that point is doing some pretty serious stuff. Guys like Jackie McLean, Ray Draper, that Herb Geller record, Fire Music, is it? The Fire something. Great, Fire Below, I can't remember. Great stuff. But Puma has a couple other records. This record is also on the Dawn label, and that's outstanding. And I think Matt Matthews might be on some of this. Yeah, Oscar Pettiford, Whitey Mitchell, and Shadow Wilson's on the drums, which is awesome. So Puma, fantastic. And then Puma also makes a session 10-inch LP on Bethlehem, number 1012. So any one of these 3 Joe Puma records, you see these records, they're fantastic. He's got lightning quick technique. He never sacrifices melody. I've really come to really enjoy my Joe Puma listening sessions. Eddie Costa on the vibes. Another guy that kind of was unsung as Eddie Costa. He plays piano and some vibraphone. Another guy, again on the Don label. Don seems to like their guitars. This is the great Jimmy Rainey. I think Rainey's a Pittsburgh guy, if I recall. Not positive. But Rainey's one of those fantastic players that's also kind of unheralded. And I'm not sure why. Rainey's a great player. He has some fairly important releases on ABC before it became Impulse. Bobby Jasper's on this, Roger Guerin, Jean-Marie Ingram. This is recorded in France, I forgot. There's that Dawn discography, all those titles, man. That Al Cohn record, outstanding. Those Jazz Modes records are outstanding. The Modern Art by Zlitzins, these Jazzville records. Don's a great label. Not that hard to get them all. None of them are going to be over $100 either. Rainey's a great player. He has quite a few records compared to some of these other guys. He makes a nice little string of stuff at ABC. This is 129. Remember, they start at 100. This is 109. And this is a Prestige 7089. And this is number 167. And this one here is actually a very early ABC record. When they first launched their jazz department, they put this out pretty early on. And this is the foremost guitars. And it's got Jimmy Rainey, Chuck Wayne, Joe Puma, and Dick Garcia. We've already talked about Garcia, Puma, and Rainey, and Chuck Wayne's coming. So all 4 of those players are guys I think are great. And if you see a record like that for $8 in a record store, you should grab it. It's fantastic stuff. And like I said, people often pass over things they don't know about. Here's another great Jimmy Rainey record with George Wallington. This is on the Emerson label, 36121. Cool cover. And George Wallington, from my understanding, was an Italian immigrant. He had a much more Italian name when he immigrated. He changed it to George Wallington, which sounds rather British, doesn't it? George Wallington from Kensington Market Avenue Street. Like, it just sounds very UK to me. But he's an American citizen at this point, and he's a great player in his own right. But Rainey is the show on that record for sure. Next guy I love to play, and I played a lot of this guy at my DJ gigs, was Salvatore. Again, kind of a Latin guy, Latin name, Mediterranean name. I don't know what it is. Is it the olive oil? What's going on here? But a lot of the great jazz guitar players ain't black. You know, Wes Montgomery, again, he's actually doesn't get a lot to do a lot of bluesy stuff. His verve output's fairly commercialized. And Kenny Burrell plays a wonderful blues, and he's a light-skinned brother too. Grant Green's probably the gutsiest, blackest of the jazz guitar players in a way. Like, he always plays hard bop, soul jazz, just blues-based. He's not really too concerned with modal or avant-garde ever, Grant Green. He's just a real solid pocket player. Anyway, Salvatore is a guy I love a lot. Light, joyous. He makes 3 records at Bethlehem. Tribute to the greats. Stan Kenton, Jerry Mulligan, Charlie Parker, Gillespie, Duke Ellington, Dave Brubeck. So he's playing their songs. This is Frivolous Sal, Bethlehem 59. This is Bethlehem 74. And then this one's The Shades of Sal, B39. And I played these Sal Salvatore records a lot at Red Cow. You can have a cup of coffee and some hash browns and a mimosa and hear that sound of Salvatore smack on top of your flapjacks, and that syrup gets a little bit sweeter. See what I'm saying? That French toast gets a little Frencher. Je suis content. Oui, oui, ha ha. So you gotta love cats like Salvatore. Again, just puts you in that place. He does this Stan Kenton Presents Jazz 10-inch on Capitol, and I have to guess this is from 54, 55, and that puts us probably before those Bethlehem records. He probably does this, jumps over to Bethlehem, makes those 3 records, and what he does after that, I'm not too sure. Can't say I've seen a lot after that. Another guy that's one of the great rhythm players in jazz and doesn't get a lot of records as a leader is a guy by the name of Thornell Schwartz. This record, believe it or not, took me a while to track down. Of course, since I found it, I've seen dozens of copies, not dozens, but I've seen at least 4 copies pop up since I found mine. Thankfully, I got mine at a good price. But Thornell Schwartz, this guy has a lot of blues in him. He's with Bill Leslie, and there's just something very genuine about the Argo label. It's not a lot of frill to it. There's not a lot of production to it in terms of let's make this session sound this certain way. No Creed Taylorification. You know, Argo's very loose, very. What do you guys want to do? Okay, do it. You know, like Blue Note in that regard. The musician gets to kind of choose the direction of the sessions. Prestige feels like there's no oversight whatsoever. They just come in, get their junk money, and go out. And that's not true for all Prestige sessions. You know, Miles sessions probably had a lot more organization than the outskirts of town did. You know, but some of those real just loose Prestige blowing sessions, they're full of the blues and full of real jazz, but they're very loose production-wise. It's not like they even sat down beforehand and said, let's make this one feel like the ocean breeze. Something as simple as that. Put all the players on the same page. Those Prestige sessions feel like everyone's on their own weather map. But I love Thornell. Again, I have quite a few of his stuff where he's a sideman playing on records. Not a ton of his stuff. This is the one I have as a leader, and this one took me a while to find. But again, I love him. Love Argo. Great stuff. And then the last one I want to show you is this Chuck Wayne record, which I don't think I even had when I made my last jazz series. I might have just gotten it. I can't recall. I talk a lot of jazz, so the details get fuzzy at times. But this is the great Chuck Wayne, and this is a record at Savoye again, number 12077. Again, you're in a color now with the Savoye album covers. It's around this time where that Mobley Message number 2 shows up. Lee Morgan's probably it's around here too. The Donald Byrd's already long out. The Keola stuff's already out. But this is great Chuck Wayne, and he's a great player. I can't tell you a whole lot about him. He looks like he's got a bit of a diversity to his repertoire. Like he might have been on some folkier and countryer stuff as well. I can't recall. It goes back to 1941 in jazz, it says. Just from the Charlie Christian school. Played with George Shearing, which it is really funny how commonplace it is for jazz musicians to really be kind of confined to their racial alignment. And I'm sure most of the players didn't plan it that way or wish it to be that way. It's just the way it was. You got work with other white players, you ended up on other white sessions. The brothers hire brothers, the white guys hire white guys, and I'm guessing a lot of it was even by the label's leanings. You know, we don't want to have these mixed records. We're going to sell this in the black neighborhood. You can't put a white guy on there. Well, we're going to sell this to the white consumer. Let's keep the line of all white. And so even into the 50s, into the 60s even, the mingling of musicians doesn't really become too commonplace to the 60s, mid-60s, where it starts to become fairly accepted. And at that point, the term race records was no more. and records were being marketed more to jazz fans. And as the 60s progressed, it seems like the interest in selling records to the black community diminishes. And the black community seems to kind of be reduced to buying 45s and listening to the radio a lot. And even the great soul, Motown, all that stuff of the 70s, a lot of that stuff was bought on 45s. Some of it was on LP, of course. A lot of it was partied with hard, so it didn't survive the test of time too well. But it's just interesting seeing how race is revealed in the music industry all the time. Way too often. You just see that little tangible legacy of the climate we live in. But anyway, that's a little serious, a little quick side note on some jazz guitar players I really like. They're all guys that are worth digging out and looking for. If you see them in a record store, buy them. They're not going to be the legacy of the greats like the Kenny Burrells, Wes Montgomerys, you know, Johnny Smiths, Grant Greens, Barney Kessels, Joe Pass, you know what I mean, Jim Halls. Those guys are all such legends. And I love all of those guys for all different reasons. This is, again, that second tier that's just, you'll find them for less than those other guys as well, which is great. And for the most part, jazz guitar records don't go for a ton of money. Even Barney Kessel stuff, Johnny Smith stuff isn't super expensive. The only guys you're really going to pay a lot for is the Wes Montgomery on Riversides. His verse stuff's going to be fairly affordable. Grant Green, part of that's because of the Blue Note. And of course, Kenny Burrell, you're going to pay a lot for his Blue Note titles, but Burrell's on a lot of labels, and his other stuff is definitely more affordable. So anyway, I'm the Jazz Shepherd. I'm launching a Patreon page soon, so you can help support me and my effort to keep making great material. I got some news coming on that soon. There's going to be a cool little online jazz video magazine with album reviews, a couple guest writers, some cool content in there. I want y'all to check it out as it comes to fruition. I'll keep you guys all posted and informed. Y'all be safe. Peace.